Remember how people said Russia was hit with so many sanctions, but was still holding steady and not going broke? Well, now they're struggling. They've stumbled, and it's a hard fall. Despite huge oil sales to China, the sanctions are finally starting to bite. Just a few months ago, a lot of people were still saying that. Judging by the numbers, Russia's economy was actually doing fine. That's because Russia had shifted into a full-on war economy, ramping up weapons production, and the government was spending heavily to boost domestic manufacturing and arms production. That's why Russia's GDP numbers were going up. And where did the government get all that money to spend at home? It came from Russia being able to redirect its oil sales from Europe. Once the sanctions hit, they just switched to selling to China instead. So they ended up making a ton of money. It even got to the point where the IMF predicted that Russia's GDP would grow more than any other major country. You can check out that clip. I'll tag it for you. Sanctions couldn't bring them down. But now Russia is hitting a snag because a lot of companies in Russia are starting to speak out saying, hey, they can't do business with China. And like I said, China is Russia's #1 trading partner. If they can't trade with China, they're definitely in trouble. Some companies have even said that doing financial transactions with China right now feels like gambling. As soon as a transaction or trade is done, they have to wait and see if they'll win or lose. It's no different from gambling. This is all happening because the United States is trying to pull China out of Russia's economy. They're doing everything they can to block Chinese factories, preventing Russia from accessing them. Because up until now, no matter how hard the United States has sanctioned or imposed heavy restrictions on Russia, China and Russia, they still managed to find ways to trade with each other. And ever since the war started, you can see that China's exports to Central Asia and the CIS have been steadily increasing, reaching a peak of $250 billion. That's the highest point. Now, with such a huge amount of money, just think about how many transactions are involved in moving and spending that much cash. It's a lot. And importantly, these transactions are happening both above board and under the table through various channels, indirectly as well. And all of this is done to avoid scrutiny from the United States. Of course, even Janet Yellen, the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, who is extremely serious about this issue, can't possibly monitor every single transaction. This really frustrates and angers the United States, because as long as China can keep sending money to Russia for trade, it means Russia will have money to attack Ukraine. That's why America and NATO are so angry. Because no matter how much money they send to support Ukraine, Ukraine still can't win, since Russia keeps getting money from China. And did you know that the United States has sanctioned Russia so much that Russia is now the most sanctioned country in the history of the world? There have been a total of 16,037 individual sanctions imposed on Russia in the form of companies, 9,386 sanctions, and 3,249 sanctions against institutions. But Russia and China can still do business with each other. So this time, the United States said, well, if sanctioning individuals, companies, or institutions doesn't work, then let's go after the middlemen. The middlemen here are the banks or financial institutions, money that handles transactions for trade. Even though these middlemen haven't done anything wrong or attacked any country, they still get sanctioned. This is called a secondary sanction, or as the US likes to call it, a secondary sanction. You can check out more details about secondary sanctions in this video right here. The more banks around the world get hit with secondary sanctions, and of course, the banks or financial institutions that are under the heaviest scrutiny globally, Chinese banks. Because China's trade is now being closely watched and is seen as financially supporting the Russian military in attacking Ukraine. So now that Chinese banks have become a focal point, if the United States imposes sanctions or secondary sanctions on Chinese banks, it's not just about dollar transactions anymore. Yuan transactions would also be completely impossible to carry out because of this. If Chinese banks get sanctioned, they'll be entirely disconnected and cut off from dollar transactions as well. That means they wouldn't be able to do yuan transactions either. The US dollar is used for as much as a massive 80% of global trade and exchange, and just in Asia alone, it's about 70%. So if China gets sanctioned and is no longer able to from dollar transactions, that means being cut off from global trade. This approach basically means that the United States is blowing up the supply chains of both China and Russia, forcing both countries into a corner. Now, we'll have to see whether this move by the US will cause long-term, short-term, or just brief pain for the economies of China and Russia. Let's take a closer look at this together. Because if Russia can't conduct transactions in yuan, exactly how much economic pain could that cause for the country? To understand this, let's take a closer look at how much Russia actually uses the yuan for transactions within its own borders. Ever since Russia invaded Ukraine, the use of the yuan in Russia has absolutely skyrocketed, reaching as high as 40%. Most of these yuan transactions are for international trade and commerce with China. Trade between Russia and China has increased by 60%. Last year, the total trade value between China and Russia reached a record high of $240 billion. Now, let's look at the rising share of the yuan in Russia. The area below this line represents yuan used for trade with China, while the area above the line shows yuan that Russia uses for trade with other countries as well, such as the UAE, Turkey, and India. That means if there's a problem with the yuan and Russia can't do transactions in yuan, it's not just that they won't be able to trade with China, they also won't be able to trade with other countries they're currently dealing with, like the UAE, Turkey, and India. But let's keep looking at China and Russia. These two countries aren't small players. They're both major powers in their own ways. It's unlikely they'll just sit back and let the United States disrupt their supply chains. They're not just going to let themselves get cornered like this. So let's take a look. Starting with China, what have they been doing? Ever since the United States announced the so-called daily sanctions, which specifically targeted Chinese banks, this led to Chinese investors selling off both stocks and mostly U.S. government bonds back in May. In other words, they dumped U.S. assets to the tune of $42,600 million in just 1 month. And even before that, the Chinese government had already been dumping U.S. government bonds continuously and in huge amounts, hundreds of billions of dollars. The scary part is, if China chooses to get rid of U.S. government bonds, that means they're giving up their status as a creditor to the United States. So from now on, if the U.S. wants to borrow money from China, it's going to be a lot harder. There's definitely some tension there. And then the question is, the United States actually has to care about whether China will lend to them or not, because right now, China is the country with the largest trade surplus in the world. In other words, China is the country that can trade and make the most profit globally.
If you look at this chart, you'll see that China has a trade surplus, or profit from global trade, of up to $1 trillion.
Regarding trade deficits, China stands alone with $1 trillion surplus. That's $1 trillion annually. With all this surplus, China must invest it somewhere. Previously, China bought U.S. bonds to facilitate trade, but now they're dumping those bonds. If they aren't buying U.S. bonds, what is China doing with that money? They're buying gold, snapping up safe assets and stockpiling gold. By hoarding gold like this, it allows the yuan to become stronger and more stable, but it's also said that they're stockpiling gold as part of a move toward de-dollarization. As for the rest of the money, China is investing it in other countries. And here's what should make the US nervous. If China really does all this, hoarding gold to push de-dollarization, strengthening the yuan, and investing and trading with other countries to build alliances, it could lead to the demand for the US dollar won't disappear, but it could decrease. This should make America nervous because the strength of the US and the dollar comes from the fact that it's widely sold and in high demand. See why in this video. The dollar isn't collapsing. Watch the whole clip and you'll see the dollar survives because it's still being sold. So if the necessity to use the US dollar, if the demand for the US dollar decreases, the need for it will also go down. It will become harder to sell the dollar, and the throne of the US dollar as the world's strongest currency will start to shake. As for Russia, they're not backing down either. They're trying to distance themselves from the US dollar as much as possible. Russia's foreign minister said that over the past year, Russia has been very committed to digitization. And now 90% of Russia's trade is already conducted using local currencies. In March, President Vladimir Putin signed an approval allowing the use of CBDC, or digital currency, for cross-border trade transactions. Currently, they are also considering a draft approval to allow the use of cryptocurrency in international trade. This is something really worth keeping an eye on, because if Russia and China, by steadfastly refusing to be backed into a corner by what the United States is trying to do right now, it could actually accelerate a global financial revolution, effectively driving the entire global community toward a new major power block much faster than ever before. Or it might even cause the boomerang effect to rebound directly against the United States itself significantly sooner than anyone expected.